you both talk about how you see your own creations and what impact, what emotional impact you want your audiences to feel, especially when your creations are grappling, to borrow your words, with difficult histories.
Well, when it comes to the Holocaust, it's not even just difficult history. It's an irreversible event of humanity. It has changed the world. It's not just one more crime, but we look at extermination, genocide in a totally different way. We have a different view of people, of what humanity is capable, the nadir that humanity can reach. When I was building the Jewish Museum and I built the Holocaust Tower, I had no light in it. There was just a black volume, and I thought there was no really hope. There's no such thing in the Holocaust. Then I read an account of a survivor who said that when she was thrown into the cattle cars, she saw a crack of light. She was speaking many years later in Brooklyn. And she said, I saw a crack of light, and I hung onto this light, and I believe I survived because I don't know whether it was the crack in the car, whether it was in her mind, what it was, but I then introduced a sliver of light in the Holocaust Tower. And then I thought about it, that without hope, there's no purpose in building anything. If there was no hope, if there was no possibility of communicating something true, something good, then the event would mean almost nothing to us. So hope has to be also part of the memory.
When Judy Goldstein from Humanity in Action contacted me about the possibility of putting together an event commemorating 7 years for Theresienstadt, the original thought was that I would perform pieces that were written in the camp. There's a lot of beautiful pieces written in the camp. So I started doing research. I wanted to put it together in a way that's meaningful as an event. And I came across Brundibar, the children's opera that was performed at the camp. And it completely struck me. I found myself wondering what would have happened to the children that did not survive, what happens with the one that did, and probably the pivotal element and question I was asking myself was, what if it was me? I chose to call the piece The Ethics.
It's a beautiful name.
Thank you, because I wanted it to apply for Jews and non-Jews alike. But there's also a quote, which to me encapsulates about our need to explore everything about the Holocaust. If you want the present to be different than the past, study the past. One of the biggest surprises for me when doing research for this piece was as a result of conversation with Ella Weisberger, who was the cat in the Brundibar opera. Oh. And she was telling me about her first love crush as a teenager in the camp. I think it was her voice teacher. Mm-hmm. And it completely changed how I saw things. I never really grappled with the fact that they were human beings with human experiences. And along with the horror, there were great moments of optimism too.
Well, you're right. My parents were survivors, Holocaust survivors, and without some sense of a future, you could not really survive. So, the very idea of what survival is and a certain kind of light in the midst of the catastrophe, whether it's music, whether it's memory, whether it's a sense of just surviving. I think without that sense, one could not really create a work of music, a work of architecture, a work of art.
And at the same time, I think that the act of creating music, the act of learning poetry, in a sense, was a way to survive for some.
Yeah.
I think that 70 years after Theresienstadt, the phrase "we shall not forget" is not enough. It needs to be followed up with keeping the memory alive. And as you say, this is not about just about Jews anymore. This is happening in so many different ways and different forms. And one of my hopes for the future is using the arts. I think the arts can be a fantastic educational tool in developing both identity and empathy. If we don't have a sense of identity, we will not be able to empathize. We don't know who we are.
Yeah.
We cannot think of putting ourselves in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
If we will think about putting ourselves in someone else's situation and position, chances are we'll be a lot kinder.
I think that's very true, because many people think that it is enough to give the information about the Holocaust. But, it's not about the information. It's about a different formation of how we look at the world. It's the information is nil. It's just a knowledge of millions of horrible things. But to, as you said, empathy, to be able to experience what that means. And I was always terrified that the Holocaust was not perpetrated by old men. It was young people. All that, and they were not people who were stupid. They were not hoodlums on the streets. They were highly educated. PhD. Goebbels had a PhD in German literature. So it's not about level, intelligence and communicating facts. It's how to create a response that has to do with the heart, the human heart. Call it ethics, call it empathy. It's a totally different level of education.
I really wanted this to apply, especially for the younger generation, for Jews and non-Jews alike. So the main musical fragment develops into my idea of what a lot of different nationalities sound like. Music is deeply rooted in our identity and culture. If you think about the idea of a national anthem, for example, quite often people are moved to tears after two syllables. Yet the music is actually usually from another country. The Israeli national anthem is basically a melody written by Smetana, who ironically was Czech.
Well, in a sense, I think both music and architecture share the fact that they are open. They cross borders, they cross religions, they cross ethnicities, they cross where you live, where you come from, and they can communicate directly to a person without having to know anything really about the past, the future. But that sudden moment can, I think, alter one's world.
Itai's composition, The Ethics, comes at this moment where there's a new generation coming forward and a new era for Holocaust memory. How do you view the future of Holocaust memory?
So you're speaking about such an event that we cannot really fathom. We use it as a model maybe for other genocides, other things that we see in the world. But it's an unprecedented event, and I think it will not come to an end. I think it'll have different forms. New generations will find different ways to express. But I think it's very important, and particularly in an era which has currents of anti-Semitism in Europe, currents of prejudice and bigotry against others. I think it's a very important task for humanity. It's not about Jews alone. It's about the world.
How do you start any new project? Is there a moment where
There has to be that moment that there has to be that spark. I mean, you can know all the things and know what are the parameters, but at the end, there's got to be something that happens to you. It's kind of happening, and you can't buy it, you can't ask for it, you can't pray for it. It just has to happen. Call it a connection, some sort of accident, some sort of experience. That comes through you through the eyes of the other, through something completely unexpected.
Have you ever had the experience of meeting someone and you simply cannot get them out of your mind, no matter what you do?
Sure.
That's how I start.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I start. And then I have to decide, is it worth my time?
Yeah.
In fact, I don't decide. it kind of
Yeah.
takes over.